Leah Sinclair had just announced her pregnancy to a cheering classroom when, only 48 hours later, she was found shot dead in her car. While Daniel Hartley, a respected school board member with everything to lose, scrambled to cover up a secret that could destroy them both. Leah Sinclair's life was the kind others quietly envied. She had a warm smile, a steady career as an English teacher, and a long-term relationship with a devoted fiancé, Matthew Doyle. At 31, she wasn't just known for her ability to inspire students. She was the heart of Willow Creek High School. Her classroom, filled with motivational quotes and shelves of worn-out books, had become a second home to many. Parents trusted her with their children, and colleagues often came to her for guidance. She had a calm, steady presence that made people feel safe. On a sunny Monday morning in September, Leah stood before her first period class with nervous excitement. With one hand resting on her stomach and the other holding a tiny pair of baby shoes, she made the announcement. She was expecting her first child. The class burst into applause, and the moment was quickly shared across social media by students, thrilled for their favorite teacher. Staff and friends congratulated her throughout the day. It felt like a moment of celebration that would linger. But some noticed something unusual. Leah's happiness seemed slightly forced, as if she was carrying more than just a pregnancy. She had started arriving at school a little earlier, parking closer to the building than usual. During lunch breaks, she kept her phone within reach, glancing at it more often than normal. At times, she looked distracted, her gaze drifting toward the hallway windows or the entrance doors. When asked, she simply blamed pregnancy nerves. Still, there was no real reason to believe anything was wrong. Leah had always been reserved when it came to personal matters. Her relationship with Matthew appeared stable, and their engagement had been the talk of the school just a few months earlier. They had picked a wedding date for the spring and were rumored to be house hunting in the suburbs. To the outside world, Leah was living a quiet, meaningful life, filled with plans for the future and the kind of joy that came from building something real. But there were hints, subtle ones, that Leah had been dealing with something privately. Her best friend Jenna later recalled how, during a lunch outing 2 weeks earlier, Leah had seemed uneasy and cautious. She kept checking the rearview mirror and casually asked if Jenna had ever felt like someone was watching her. Jenna had dismissed it as anxiety. Looking back, she wished she had asked more questions. 2 days after the pregnancy announcement, Leah left school at her usual time. She waved goodbye to a student in the parking lot, got into her car, and drove home. That would be the last time anyone saw her alive. At the time, no one could have imagined that such a joyful moment would mark the beginning of a tragic chain of events. Leah Sinclair's story, which began with hope and new life, would soon unravel into one of the most chilling murder cases the town of Willow Creek had ever seen. The discovery of Leah Sinclair's body stunned the peaceful community of Willow Creek. It was Wednesday evening when a neighbor noticed her silver sedan still idling in the parking lot of her apartment complex. The engine had been running for hours, and the driver's side window was fogged from the inside. When the neighbor cautiously approached, the scene inside was haunting. Leah sat slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving, her body eerily still. Emergency services were called immediately, but by the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing to be done. Leah had been shot in the head at close range. The wound was precise, with no other visible signs of violence. She had been killed instantly. Police quickly secured the scene, taping off the small lot as forensics began their work. Leah's purse was untouched in the passenger seat, and her phone, face down on the console, had received several missed calls from Matthew. Her lunch container, barely touched, rested beside her bag. Nothing appeared to have been stolen, and her car wasn't forced open. It was unlocked, as if she had expected someone. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, and no eyewitnesses who had seen anyone approach her car. It was a clean, cold execution, carried out in broad daylight. News spread rapidly. Local reporters scrambled to the scene, and within hours, the school district issued a statement expressing shock and heartbreak. Classes were cancelled for the rest of the week, and grief counselors were brought in for both students and staff. Leah had been more than just a teacher. She had been a pillar of the school community. The idea that someone could do this to her, without warning or reason, left people shaken and afraid. The autopsy confirmed what many already suspected. Leah had died from a single bullet to the left temple, fired from just inches away. She had not seen it coming. The path of the bullet and lack of hesitation wounds suggested she had been approached while in the car, likely by someone she knew or trusted enough not to feel threatened by. Even more heartbreaking, the autopsy confirmed her pregnancy. She was 10 weeks along. Investigators began working around the clock. There was no sign of forced entry at her apartment, no evidence of a break-in. Security cameras at the complex offered limited views, and while they captured Leah arriving home shortly after school, the footage revealed no suspicious figures nearby. The hours that followed raised more questions than answers. Who would want to harm her? Why was nothing taken? And how had someone gotten so close without alerting anyone? Leah's death didn't feel random. It felt deliberate, planned. Someone had waited for the right moment, approached her vehicle, and pulled the trigger without leaving behind a single trace. It was too precise to be impulsive, too controlled to be opportunistic. And the longer investigators looked at the scene, the clearer it became. This was personal. The investigation into Leah Sinclair's murder began to pick up momentum as detectives examined every aspect of her life. Her phone records were among the first things scrutinized. What they found was disturbing. In the 2 weeks leading up to her death, Leah had received more than a dozen calls from a blocked number, most of them placed after midnight. None of the voicemails left clues, but the pattern suggested deliberate harassment. When investigators reviewed her browser history, a clearer picture emerged. Leah had been searching for information on how to trace anonymous callers, how to tell if someone was tracking her phone, and even whether someone could be following her without her knowledge. This information painted a different portrait of Leah than the one her friends and family knew. She hadn't mentioned feeling unsafe, but she had clearly been worried. The question was, why hadn't she told anyone? And who was she afraid of? Her fiancé, Matthew Doyle, became the first person of interest. He was cooperative, but visibly shaken. He described Leah as stressed in the days leading up to her death, though he chalked it up to pregnancy anxiety and the pressures of work. When asked about his whereabouts on the day of the murder, Matthew stated that he had been on shift at the firehouse. On the surface, his alibi seemed solid. However, surveillance footage raised doubts. A nearby traffic camera caught his vehicle, exiting the fire station's parking lot around 3:15 p.m., less than an hour before Leah was believed to have been killed. When questioned, Matthew admitted he had gone out for a short drive after a heated conversation with Leah over the phone. He said he needed to clear his head. Although this didn't prove guilt, it created a hole in his timeline and cast suspicion his way. Further interviews with Leah's close friends added new depth to the case. Her best friend, Jenna, reluctantly shared a confession Leah had made just 2 weeks prior. Leah believed the baby she was carrying might not be Matthew's. She hadn't revealed the man's name, but said he was someone important, someone with a lot to lose if the truth came out. Leah had ended the affair before discovering her pregnancy and was struggling with whether or not to come clean. Detectives now had a possible motive, one that pointed beyond a simple act of jealousy. If Leah had been involved with someone powerful, someone who felt threatened by the pregnancy, it could explain the secrecy, the threatening phone calls, and the sense of fear she never voiced aloud. Attention shifted away from Matthew and toward Leah's professional life. Investigators learned that Leah had been volunteering for a local literacy charity, one connected to several high-ranking members of the school board and local government. It was a detail that seemed insignificant until they discovered one name that stood out: Daniel Hartley. He was well known, married, and heavily involved in school affairs, and, as the detectives would soon learn, he had been spending time with Leah behind closed doors. As investigators delved deeper into Leah's connection with Daniel Hartley, they began to uncover a troubling narrative that had remained hidden beneath the surface of her otherwise quiet life. Daniel was a respected figure in the community, an influential school board member, married for over 15 years, with 2 children and a spotless public image. He and Leah had first crossed paths through the literacy charity program. What had started as a professional collaboration had, according to evidence, evolved into something much more personal. Security footage obtained from a local cafe near the school showed Leah and Daniel meeting discreetly on multiple occasions. Each meeting seemed intentionally low profile, no public displays of affection, no signs of familiarity, but the frequency raised questions. Phone records confirmed they had exchanged over 200 text messages in the previous month, most of them late at night. Although Daniel denied any romantic involvement, digital forensics told a different story. From Leah's cloud backup, detectives recovered deleted texts that included affectionate language and private meeting arrangements. The messages stopped abruptly 2 weeks before her death. Around the same time, Leah had begun receiving threatening calls. This coincidence wasn't ignored. Investigators believed Daniel had broken off the affair in fear of exposure, and when Leah discovered she was pregnant, the situation escalated. Further inquiries revealed Daniel had hired a private investigator named Kurt Beasley. Daniel claimed it was to ensure Leah wouldn't damage his reputation or fabricate claims, but his justification didn't hold up. Beasley was no ordinary investigator. He was a former police officer with a history of misconduct and an unresolved suspension tied to excessive force. The fact that Daniel had chosen someone like him suggested more than just concern about rumors. It hinted at fear, desperation, and a willingness to control the situation by any means necessary. Beasley was tracked down and brought in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Leah's murder, but admitted he had followed her and photographed her on multiple occasions at Daniel's request. When pressed about Leah's gun, which had been reported stolen 6 months earlier, Beasley hesitated. A search warrant for his residence uncovered a collection of unregistered firearms, and in a locked case, police found Leah's missing handgun. Ballistics confirmed it matched the bullet that had taken her life. At that moment, Beasley's role in the case shifted. No longer just a hired observer, he became the prime suspect. Investigators believed Daniel had asked him to intimidate Leah, but something had gone horribly wrong, or perhaps exactly as planned. Despite denying any order to harm Leah, Daniel's communications painted a darker picture. In one deleted message, retrieved from Beasley's phone, Daniel had written, "I need this handled quietly. She's going to ruin everything." That message, paired with the recovered weapon and timeline, was enough to implicate both men in a conspiracy far more sinister than anyone had expected. What began as a suspected affair had morphed into a calculated attempt to silence a woman whose truth threatened powerful lives. With both Daniel Hartley and Kurt Beasley in custody, The investigation into Leah Sinclair's murder reached its final and most revealing stage. Public shock turned into outrage as the details became known. The community struggled to reconcile the image of a trusted school board member and a former officer with the cold-blooded killing of a beloved teacher and her unborn child. The evidence was overwhelming. Leah's stolen gun was found in Beasley's possession. Deleted text messages between him and Daniel pointed to coordination. Surveillance footage placed Beasley near Leah's apartment on the day she died, and his phone records showed he had been in the area during the critical time frame. Under pressure, Beasley finally broke. During a lengthy interrogation, he admitted to confronting Leah in the parking lot under Daniel's instructions. He claimed his original intent was to scare her, to convince her to keep quiet about the affair and the pregnancy, but the story quickly fell apart. Forensics revealed he had worn gloves, used a homemade silencer, and approached her car when no one was around. It wasn't an act of intimidation. It was an execution. Daniel, on the other hand, continued to deny involvement. He portrayed himself as a victim of blackmail, insisting Beasley had acted on his own. But the digital trail proved otherwise. The language in their messages grew increasingly desperate in the days leading up to the murder. "She's not backing down," Daniel had texted. "Do what you have to do." That line, prosecutors argued, was a directive, a signal to act. The trial was one of the most closely followed in county history. Journalists filled the courtroom as prosecutors laid out the story in painful detail. Leah had been silenced to protect the reputation of a man who saw her as a threat to his perfect image. The child she carried had been part of a truth he wasn't willing to face. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict Beasley of first-degree murder. Daniel Hartley was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Matthew Doyle, though cleared of any wrongdoing, remained haunted by the loss. He had stood by Leah's side, unaware of the hidden turmoil she had been facing. In an emotional statement after the verdict, he spoke publicly for the first time. Leah didn't deserve to die because someone else was afraid of the truth. She was brave enough to face it, even when she was alone. In the aftermath, the school district launched an internal review of staff and leadership. The charity Leah had volunteered with was restructured and renamed in her honor. A memorial garden was planted outside Willow Creek High School, and every year students gather there to remember the teacher who gave them stories, hope, and inspiration. Leah's life was cut short, but the impact she left behind endured. Her story became more than a tragedy. It became a warning about secrets, power, and how far some will go to silence the voices that dare to speak up.